Susan Ashley and welcome to my YouTube channel, Susan&Kassandra. Please like and share these videos as I feel this is the time on the planet that it's very important to understand certain energies that are playing out at the moment. Today I'd like to talk to you about the variations of darkness, shadow and light, and why having an understanding of those three frequencies will help you to not only manifest faster, but also help the world to become a more peaceful, kind and considerate environment in which to live in. That's the ultimate goal for people like myself, to ensure that the well-being of every man, woman and child is respected. And that's why I do the work that I do. And as I said to you, I worked with a lot of darkness, and what I understand from that is that obviously most people aren't connected with that sort of thing. Most people live in the grey, in the shadow, so they're not in the dark and they're not in the light. And there are many people that, particularly in religions, that would say that they're in the light because they're good, they consider themselves good people. But they're still disrespectful of people who are not in that religion. They are disrespectful of people's rights to choose certain things. Like, I know vaccines is a really hot subject for many. People really get either way, they're very hot under the collar. And really it's about choice when you think about it. So you have the grey matter that creates this reality of we all have to be under control and we all have to think the same way. And that's not necessarily true, because the light of love understands the divinity in each and every person. And if you understand the divinity in every person, then you'd understand that their own inner knowing is correct for them. You see, if you were to look at science, perhaps, some people's DNA can't tolerate certain chemicals, so they would have a very bad reaction, and that reaction would stay with them for their entire life. And they may not know consciously that they are allergic to that substance, but there's just something they feel. It's the same with a parent. They might just feel it's not right for their child. I made decisions for my child, many moons ago before the internet. And now, as he's gotten older, we realise that had I not made that decision through the grace of the guides that I work with, he could have died because he was highly allergic to certain substances. And people probably thought I was crazy. But I just had this intuitive knowing as a mother. And that's what I'm saying, like, the people who are pro-vaccine are really, really going at the people who are anti. And usually the people who are anti are people who've had experiences that are very unpleasant, or they wouldn't be, right? And their own inner knowing, their own divinity is telling them something's not right for my child or for me. So their own biology is giving them a signal to say, don't do it. So that's what I mean by respecting everyone's divinity. And you might, I can hear people saying, well, what about people who think it's their divinity to abuse children or abuse their wife? That's not divinity. That's not light. That's darkness, right? That's darkness. And if they want to go into the darkness, so be it. But I don't want that darkness in my reality, and I'm hoping that you don't either. That's being connected to something quite dark. So the grey matter is something that really controls us, and it keeps us separated from the divinity and from the darkness. And I'm hoping that you really understand that, right? Because most people reside in the grey, in the shadow part of themselves, which means their fear, their compromise, their guilt, their shame, their anger, their resentment, their jealousy, their neediness, their denial. That's what the grey is. That's what the shadow is. And you know, in the 80s, there was a lot of people who did shadow work, and obviously I was one of them. I've pretty much done everything you can think of. And I still adhere to that most exist in the shadow and they don't know it. And when you're in the shadow, you're not fully in the light, or you're not fully in the dark. Now, I talked about embracing the darkness. I didn't mean take it on and make it part of yourself. What I meant was to accept that it exists. Because it's not until we accept that something exists that we have the opportunity to remove it or remove ourselves. It's like, you know, we could have an alcoholic partner or a gambler. Gambling is interesting because it's often held in secret. So the gambler will often gamble a lot of money and say it was stolen, or this happened or that happened. And so the partner of a gambler will want to believe them, even though they know in their heart, I think they're gambling, there's something not right, they'll know. But they'll be in denial about it because they want to see that person as different. They want to see that person in the eyes of where they're coming from. So that denial around the gambling keeps everyone in the shadow because the truth is not being revealed. And when the truth isn't revealed, the shadow can exist. Right? So it's not until someone admits and they say, yeah, that's right, they're a gambler, or yes, I'm an alcoholic, or yes, I'm a drug addict, that they actually take action to heal that. So the shadow is the denial. That's what I'm explaining to you. And most people live in the shadow. And that keeps them away from the light, from truly embracing their divinity. Now, when someone's been abused, I mean, I saw this play out a lot in abuse, you know. People who've been abused live in the shadow. So they live in fear, they live in pain, they live in sometimes even denial and rejection of what happened to them, because to accept it would maybe make them feel like they're going to go mad. So I notice there's a lot of denial and people calling it cognitive dissonance, because people are refusing to even read information that's not been supplied by government or the very company that wants to control you. You know, it's like, again, I'm going to go back to vaccines. Vaccine, big pharma, finances politicians who then put into law or action or cover up their wants and needs and what they're doing. So pharmaceutical companies also pay off doctors and researchers to give them the information that they want, to falsify things. So here you have people who refuse to even read anything that doesn't come from the very scientists that are being paid by Big Pharma, or the government system that's being paid by Big Pharma. They actually refuse. No, the doctor said, no, the government said, right? They refuse, because if they were to read something that's alternative in their eyes, if they were to read what's inside these vaccines, who did the research, who paid for the research, if they were to find out that, they would then have to do something. So they can't do that because they're so busy surviving, you know, being on the treadmill of getting up in the morning, getting the kids ready for school or whatever they're doing, and then going to work, working all day, coming home just looking forward to eating something and watching some mindless program on TV to escape. So if they were to know the truth, they could no longer go into that escape. they would have to do something. And that's what they fear. So fear is the shadow, right? So they're stuck in the shadow. And I know heaps of people that say to me, well, you know, I'm a light being, I'm really kind, I'm really generous, I'm really giving. And yes, they are. And they are in contact with their divinity. But there's also a part of them that's still holding the shadow of the pain that they experienced. And they're too afraid to face it. They're afraid to face it because they fear they're going to get so angry they would kill someone. So they fear their own shadow. And because they fear their own shadow, it stays in them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I often have people who say, I want to create this, I want to create that. But the fear that's running them, like, okay, so what can you do? What steps can you take? And you start saying the steps they can do. Oh, I can't do that. I can't do that because, you know, other people will find out. So then how are you going to do it if you cannot even take the first step that exposes your divinity because you're afraid that people are going to attack you and be horrible to you? How are you going to? So again, they're in denial. I mean, plenty of therapists work with people like that. You say to them, okay, so let's talk about, you know, the steps you can make towards loving yourself, for instance. Do you think you could take 15 minutes a day to sit and read? Or what is it that you like to do? Oh, I like to draw. Okay, so do you think you could take 15, 20 minutes a day to simply go into the frequency of drawing and fulfilling your divinity? Oh no, my husband won't let me. My kids won't give me the time. I have to go to work. I don't have time. I don't have the money. I don't have this. I don't have that. They will give you every single excuse not to do it. And the reason they're doing it is not because they're difficult. It's because the shadow of their pain resides in them so strongly. They have inertia. It's like the pain is being told you're stupid as a child, or being, you know, teased for the drawing that you did, or being told that you're different and you want to fit in. So there's pain associated with inaction, right? So when I see all these people in complete denial and completely not willing to even look at something or read something or even accept that there may be another point of view, and what they're doing in that shadow is they're speaking on behalf of the government and the big pharma, and they're yelling at people. They're saying, I have heard of people who want to persecute a 5-year-old in the playground because they found out it wasn't vaccinated. They want to bash the kid, is the sort of shit that they say. How is that being in divinity? And yet those people will consider themselves God-fearing, good, honest, hard-working people. But they're willing to physically attack a 5-year-old. I mean, yeah, it can blow your head, can't it? Yeah, the grey. It can blow your mind. So what happens with that shadow is that it creates resistance inside us. So it doesn't allow us to go into that part of ourselves we know exists. And we go into resistance with it, like, I don't have time, I don't have the money, I can't do it because of this. You know, what if I find out that I'm a bad person? Or the other one is, what if I hurt someone with it, with my honesty? Right? So when people are abused, they don't want to tell certain family members because they don't want to hurt the family. They don't want to create that pain for the family, so they keep it in themselves. And what they're keeping in themselves is that shadow. And that shadow is rendering them stuck. It makes them stuck. So they're not in either thing. They haven't made a decision whether they're going to go into the light, the divinity, or whether they're going to go into the darkness. Well, obviously, most people aren't going to go in the darkness, are they? They're seeking out the light. What they're seeking is connection. What they're seeking is love. Whether it is that they want to give love, because some people who are abused don't get the opportunity to give love. Some people who are abused have to separate part of themselves, so they're not present during the abuse. They're somewhere else, they're watching the whole thing. They're a voyeur. They're not connected to their emotion. So when you disconnect from your emotion and your humanity, because it's humanity that guides the heart, isn't it? Well, it's within the heart, actually. So, when you're disconnected from your humanity, from your heart, you have to go somewhere else. And that's very painful for a lot of individuals. It's very painful. And, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've experienced like really bad sexual abuse or something like that. But if you're a sensitive child who's very creative and you're growing up in a family that's very analytical and you're constantly getting the message there's something wrong with you, you'll separate yourself. Or if you've got very controlling parents who do everything for you, oh, I haven't got time for this, I'll tie your laces. I remember this child, a friend of mine's child, he was 9 at the time, and one day he was told, put your shoes on, and he got really distressed. And I said, what's going on? He goes, I don't know how to tie my shoelaces. I said to him, what do you mean you don't know how to, he's 9, what do you mean you don't know how to tie your shoelaces? And he said, I don't know how to. I said, okay, well, let me show you how to tie your shoelaces. Very easy. Because his mother did everything for him because she didn't have time to teach him. And actually what she used to say was, I don't have time for this shit. So when you say that for a child, you're telling that child it's a piece of shit, aren't you? Don't have time for this shit. Oh, let me do it. And then there's anger. And so all that anger is going in, and then the child gets it's frightened, it's disturbed. So of course, when someone is being like that towards you, you can't do anything because you're afraid. You can't operate your body properly to even tie a shoelace. So then you make mistakes, and then the parent is getting more upset because you're making more mistakes. But you're making mistakes because there's no connection. There's no tenderness to tell you, it's okay, we've got time, it's fine. So I sat down and I started to teach him to tie the shoelace. Well, in the end, he threw the shoe at me and everything. I mean, he was so angry. And I said, because he was frustrated with himself, even though I was kind, but, he was frustrated because he felt embarrassed, he felt ashamed. He didn't know how to coordinate himself with that, because I'll tell you that child was still getting its food cut up every day and fed to him at 9. All right? And it exists. So what I'm saying is, when you have parents that are over-controlling, they take away the will that you have, but they also lock you into a shadow. And you know that your only protection then, your only solace is to be good girl, to be a good boy. So going into that frustration and that anger is scary, because you think, oh my God, I'm going to lose, particularly as an adult. So you've experienced that all your childhood. You've not been allowed to express yourself. You've not been allowed to learn how to create and do things for yourself and become independent. And then you become an adult and you wonder why, 1, you can't make a decision to save yourself, and 2, you're emotionally detached. You can't feel yourself. So then you start to live in the shadow, and the shadow creates inertia. I can't do anything. I'm stuck. I'm frozen. Right? There are many aspects to the shadow, but what I'm saying, I'm just giving you some examples of how the shadow resides within us and we don't know it. and how it makes us feel stuck because we haven't made a decision. But the good thing is that at the moment we are being asked to choose a side. And that's why this confinement is really interesting, because it's taking people into their shadow, isn't it? You can see it, you can feel it. Some people are so scared, like where we live, we go out every day to the shop. We're allowed to go to the shop. So every day we go to buy something as an excuse to go out in the fresh air. The sky's really blue. There's no traffic. It's fantastic, right? So we go out every day. And some days we can go to the forest. So we go to the forest. And we live in a very high density population, right? So if you look out my window, my kitchen window, I'm just going to show you. Look at all the apartments here, right? Loads. I live right in the centre of the city. In the city, okay? So we've got lots of people here. Lots of people. Now I'm going to straighten this up. So sorry. We've got lots of people here. But we go to the shop, there's no one walking. Why is that? They're freaked out. They're absolutely scared. Okay, so they're all hiding in the house, in their fear, in their shadow, and not listening to their divinity. When you listen to your divinity, when you're in the light, you know what day it is. It's okay to go out, and you know what day it's not. I know, because I could spend 2 days in the house and feel really strongly can't go out today. And then other days I'm out and about. So that's what I mean by being in your divinity, being in your light, right? So this is an opportunity to go into the darkness or the shadow of yourself. It's not darkness, but we fear it's darkness. We think, oh my God, it's so terrible that I got angry. And, you know, I know a lot of you that are listening to this sometimes have laid in bed at night berating yourself because you said something at work or to a relative or a friend. They've probably forgotten, but you've said something that's slightly off. My phone's going a bit funny. And you're thinking about it all night. Oh my God, I should have said something else. I should have done something else. Because something in you has been told there's something wrong with you. And that not being good enough, not being worthy, not being right is keeping you in the shadow. So this is why I have a really big thing about, pro-choice. Because I feel that we all know what's right for us. And it allows us to touch that divinity in ourselves and honour that. And when you've got people around you screaming at you, you're an idiot. Bash the kid. You're an idiot for thinking that way. Well, that's the shadow for sure, right? Right? Someone who's in divinity says, like I do, well, that's okay that you want to do that. It doesn't charge me at all. If you want to load yourself up with vaccines, fine with me, I don't care. I honestly do not care. And I know that I'll even cop flack for that. How could you not care about the children being vaccinated? But they've got parents. I'm a parent. It's the parent's choice. I can't do anything about it. All I can do is say, I am pro-choice. I'm pro-choice. So I can accept that person wants to do those vaccines. I can accept it. If they want to do it, fine, let them do it. I don't care. I honestly don't care. Because if they're not listening to their divinity, maybe something will happen. But maybe their DNA is okay to accept that. I have to accept that as well. Some people don't have allergies to these things. Some people, their bodies are okay with it. So if we're going to accept a person who doesn't want it, if we're going to champion that, then we have to also accept and champion the person who wants its choice. That's what the light is. Acceptance. It's the middle. It's not this. Okay, so let's say that the grey, the shadow, is the bridge that keeps these two sectors, the dark and the light, separate. So as you move into 5D, you'll find that the shadow is getting smaller and smaller, and some say the veil is getting smaller and smaller. It's all interconnected. So this is getting smaller and smaller. So then we have to make a decision. What side are we going to go on? That's what it's all about. And the shadow is keeping us stuck. And what the shadow does is it feeds the darkness, actually, more than it does the light. Because people in shadow are living more in fear and denial than people who are connected to the light. So as people start to connect to the light, they start to surrender their shadows. So they go get healing. You know, it doesn't happen overnight, but they'll go get healing. They'll start to read. They'll start to inform themselves. They'll start to learn new things. You know, their minds and their hearts will start to open up. They'll start to accept that not everybody lives like them, and that's okay. What is religion? Religion is the shadow personified. I actually think religion is evil as well. But most people who participate in religion are in the shadow. So they feel, everyone knows religion is full of shame and guilt, isn't it? And there are some religions that are even worse than others as far as that darkness is concerned. But I'm digressing. I don't want to talk about religion actually, because it's a touchy subject with people. And I can get really, that's one thing that will rile me up a little bit, because I've seen what happens in religion, and I really just want to accept that there are people that choose to align themselves with that because they like it. Hard to conceive of, and there are some that just want to feel connection. So we go to church, the mosque, the synagogue, these places to gather together, to sing, to pray together, to be part of community, and that is a good thing. It's what they're being taught that I don't like. So I can accept that some people just need to go for community. Anyway, the shadow is that as it's getting weaker and weaker, because people are choosing, they're starting to choose what side. So you'll see at the moment dark and light are getting stronger, because the shadow is being dissipated, because people are privy to more information. So when you're frustrated with people still living deeply in the shadow of denial around certain things, accept that, and maybe that'll make a shift for them. Because as long as you're fighting and in resistance of the shadow, it will have a hold on you, and it will disconnect you from your emotions. And that's why so many people say, I don't know, I don't feel anything. Because they're scared to go into their shadow and actually admit what they're feeling, because their feelings were unacceptable when they were young or ignored. And when you reside in the shadow, you can think you're going mad, and it keeps you separate, right? On so many levels, I'm not even going to start to go into that, but it does keep you separate on a lot of levels. So let me just explain to you a really good way of releasing the shadow that you have towards someone. So the anger, the resentment, the pain. Because as long as you're holding it in, because it's really about being honest with yourself, right? So it's really interesting, because if you've been hurt by a friend and you go to that friend and you say, you know, when you said that to me the other day, I was deeply offended because I felt that, got to keep it in the eye. Remember, the art of communication is to keep it in the eye. I've got a cup of coffee here. I'm going to have a sip. So you keep it in the eye and you say, the other day when you know, I felt like you dismissed me, and I felt like you dismissed my opinion, and I really value you as a friend, and I value your opinion, and I really honestly felt that you didn't value mine at that time. So I felt, you know, I didn't feel valued, and I just wanted to say that to you, right? And your friend might say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I was just thinking about all these things, and to be honest, I wasn't really listening to what you said. Or, you know, your friend might actually be able to respond to you in a way where it heals the situation, right? But most of us don't. We walk off and we say, ugh, you know, what a cow, sort of thing. They don't care about me. And that validates the fact that nobody cares about me and all of this sort of thing. So that's one way of working through the shadow. But if the person then turns around and says to you, instead of that, they say, what are you talking about? You shouldn't have got that from that. I don't understand, you know, and they really serve you up for even challenging, not challenging, but even broaching the subject that you might have had your feelings hurt. And that'll shut you right down. So when they do that and they say, oh, you were just talking shit and I didn't want to hear it, right? That really is invalidating. And it's not accepting that you might have a different belief, you might have a different frequency, but you can still be friends, right? So you as a loving, kind person cannot fight back. You know, you're not going to say, you bitch, you did this, you know. And if you did, you'd be wiped out for weeks over the shame and the guilt of it all. But let's say you hold it in. So you hold it in and you go back home and you feel like crap and you can't sleep because you're angry and you're really pissed off because this isn't the first time this person has done it to you. But what it's actually done is triggered perhaps what happened to you as a child. So it's triggered all of those memories, but you're just relating it to your friend. Okay, so what you can do is you have to get the shadow out. You have to say your piece. So you can write it out, you can journal it. But a really good way to do it is, and I used to do this with people, right? And it can, you know, there's ways of doing things. I'm just going to share one way because there is one way that you can do it that is quite physical, you know, so probably you won't want to do that. But say you're on your own. If you're not with a therapist, there are ways to do it that a therapist can help you, but there are ways to do it on your own. So you're on your own and you might have a teddy bear or a doll or, I don't know, an animal of some, not a real animal, not a live animal, but something that, you know, a statue of something. And you place that in front of you, and between you and that symbol represents that person. And then in between that, you place a candle that's lit. You light a candle because the candle actually is a purifier. Fire purifies. And we're doing this with the intention of purifying the shadow that you're holding within yourself. And that shadow may not even belong to you. You know, it might be a combination of yours and theirs because they don't like people telling them what to do. Or they don't like people trying to get them to think in another way. So they've attacked you, right? So you understand that that represents that person, and the light represents, the candle represents the burning off of the purification of the emotion that you're about to let go of. And you know that that candle's between you and that person. So what it represents is, I'm not psychically attacking you, because sensitive people realize that their words, their energy have power, and they're scared to go into their emotions and feel that power because they've had a past life experience or some experience where that power of that emotion has created pain for others. And that's the last thing they want to do. So understanding that the fire is a purifier for all those emotions, so that that person that you're screaming at, hopefully, doesn't receive it. Not hopefully that they don't receive it, but hopefully you're going to scream at the person, right? They don't receive it. So then you imagine a circle around you and you call in whoever you want to call in, the angels, divas, your guides, your ancestors, and you ask, you know, create a sacred circle around me so that I can release my shadow around that, my emotions around this, so that I'm not holding it in. Because when you hold that in, it makes you numb, right? It disconnects you from everything. So this is why people often don't have relationships, because they're disconnected from their emotion. And when you're disconnected from your emotion, you're only in your head, you're not vibrating out a vibration of love, even though you think you are, okay? So then you look at that symbol through the flame. You look at that doll or whatever it is that represents that person, and you literally say to them, the other day when you said that to me, it reminded me of my mother and what my mother used to do to me. And then that person might turn into your mother. You say, Mum, I know you don't understand, but what you did was you took away my innocence. You made me feel so stupid and worthless that I hid myself from the world. I didn't want to connect with anyone. And because of those words that you said to me repeatedly, I don't know how to love. I am alone and I'm not connecting. And you just go on like that until, you know, you might cry, you might scream, you might be unable to breathe. And it might be scary because you're getting all this emotion out. And this emotion could be there from lifetimes. Just trust that emotion, you know, it's very physical. So emotion has to come out in order for you to release the shadow. But once it's gone, you'll probably feel really exhausted and you'll sleep really well. But maybe in 2 days, you're going to feel like a burden lifted off you. And then I'd suggest that you learn some communication techniques on what should be your automatic response when someone, you know, talks harshly to you. And maybe you might even find that something happens that those people can no longer be in your life. And, you know, I've had that, where I've lost friends that were there for a particular role, and I might have felt lonely, but I've always known that when something leaves, something comes. So I just trusted new people will come into my life that are of the vibration that I am now, because I'm not willing to hold that shadow in me anymore. We all have the shadow. And the shadow can separate us from these worlds. And what we want is we want to go into the light, to that loving connection. And the shadow keeps us away from it. So that's what I wanted to say about the shadow today. And I'll probably talk more about it because I feel it's a really, really deep subject. And if you find yourself wanting to do that sort of work with yourself, please do, because you'll find it very powerful. You'll find that it will unburden you and release you, and also journaling, because what I find with a lot of people who hold the shadow, who are connected to the light, they feel a lot of guilt and shame. And they even feel bad about writing it down or even speaking that they were upset about someone, and particularly their family members, you know, because you love them. And that's a good technique to do it without actually doing it in front of them, because a lot of the time they're unconscious too and they don't even know that they're doing it. Just like that mother of that little boy, she had no idea she was rendering her child disempowered. None whatsoever. So, and she didn't want to know. And that's what I said in a video a little while back. I said, being my friend is not easy. Obviously, I'm no longer friends with that person, but because when you're around someone who is honest with themselves and that vibration is there, you actually bring up people's shadow for them to be honest with themselves. And sometimes they don't like it. They want to hold on to it. So they project it onto you. So that person created a massive drama in their life and blamed me for it. And I wasn't even there. I had nothing to do with it. But you see how it works? Because they can't take responsibility. Accepting the shadow is about taking full responsibility for everything that you experience in the sense of your reaction to it and what you're holding on to. I'm not talking about if someone comes up and bashes you in the head or has abused you as a child. That's not your responsibility. What others do to you is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself. If you allow them to continue doing it as an adult, when you have free will to move away, to say no, to, you know, change job or whatever, then you have to accept, I'm accepting this situation for this reason. So you take responsibility in acceptance, right? So when you know, I mean, all of us have experienced a friend who's being abused by their partner. We say, leave them, leave them, leave them. I can't, I've got kids, I've got no money, etc. They'll give you all these reasons. And while they're looking at the fact that they're stuck, they'll never be free. But the fact is that they're living in a shadow, right? They're living in the shadow of themselves, the injured child, the injured person that they believe on some level, unfortunately, they deserve it or they're a vibrational match to it, right? The vibrational match is that perhaps that person has their own anger deep inside that they never express, and their partner's expressing it to bring it out in them. Enough anger that they turn around and say, no, I've had enough. No. I'm not talking about going killing the partner, but what I'm saying is to get that brewing, that anger and that, you know, part of you that says enough and I don't deserve this, right? So that's where the fight comes from. It's the enough. The acceptance that you don't deserve it, and the acceptance that this person is being abusive. And it's really interesting because when you make the decision, I've seen it happen many times, when a woman makes the decision, she doesn't want to be abused anymore, the solution comes. It's while she's in the shadow of confusion and feeling like there's something wrong with her, etc., that the answer doesn't come. And she'll seek out an answer from other people, but it has to actually come from within. People can guide her. They can say, make a plan, which is always good advice. They can say, here's the number of, you know, an association you can go to that will help you. But she won't use that number until she's made the decision that it's enough and accepted that she's in that situation. Okay, so that's it for today. I'm going to love you and leave you, and I hope you've enjoyed this video about the shadow. Bye.